Women, what's the most ridiculous thing you've had to do to get a guy to leave you alone? Called his grandmother. Was working at a diner in college after moving back to my hometown. I reconnect with a childhood friend, have some polite conversation but maintain strict boundaries. Then he started showing up at my workplace every single day and hit on me relentlessly. Got to the point where he would come in, buy a coffee or a soda, and then hang out for hours until my shift was over so he could follow me to my car. I wasn't allowed to kick him out of the diner because, hey, he's a paying customer, and I didn't think I could call the cops. I told him over and over and over again to leave me alone, but of course, nothing. At one point, he went to the diner while I was in class because, of course, he had memorized my schedule like a creepy little worm, and convinced my boss that he was my cousin and he had to get my phone number from her because our grandmother had an accident. That was the final straw. I went home, called my great-grandma, and got her to pull his grandmother's phone number out of her address book. We had a great talk, and she put the beat down on him, I guess, because I never saw him again after that. Damn, you know it's serious when Grandma gets involved. Story 2. Okay, this is heavy, and I've never told anyone because it makes me feel ridiculous. Anyway, I was at a party in college, out at this girl's house in the middle of nowhere, and everyone was drinking. I had too much and needed fresh air and to grab my purse, so I went out and sat behind my car. This guy came out and sat next to me. I was in my English class, so I knew him, but we never really talked. Long story short, he hit on me. I rejected him, and he flipped out and forced me into my back seat to try to essay me. I was parked far enough away and in the dark so no one saw me, and all my intoxicated brain could think was that awful advice of whiz yourself and your attacker will be grossed out and leave. So I did. He was pretty grossed out, called me a sick witch, and left. I was too embarrassed to go back, so I just left. I drove home intoxicated and ashamed and crying. Luckily, I made it there safe. I took a shower and laughed at myself and cried. So yeah, probably the farthest I've gone to get rid of a guy. You know, it's a pretty common theme at Rufus Stories now to wish bad on bad people, so I hope that guy dies in a ditch. Story 3. After me and my ex broke up, he stalked me for 2 years. He would text me every so often, and I would be polite and ask him how he was. Then he would start to insult me when I didn't want to hang out with him. He cheated on me with another girl. After getting sick of his random text messages, I pretended that it wasn't my number. When he messaged me, I said, "Who is this?" He was like, "You know who it is." I replied with, "I just got this number and guys are constantly texting it for this chick named blank." My ex apologized and never heard from him again. Story 4. I went on a date to the beach with this guy and he invited me to his house. We ate some food and afterwards he kissed me. It made me a little uncomfortable, so I told him I had to go and that I had plans. He tried to convince me to stay and then said that I couldn't leave until I said I would be his girlfriend. Red flags are going off, and so I tried to keep the mood very light and started to gather my things while saying things like, "Oh, you really like me, hey? That's sweet." I went to leave and suddenly he's in front of me, grabbing my wrists and asking me to be his girlfriend. "Yeah, okay, bud. Whatever you say. I'm your girlfriend now." Unfortunately, he drove, so I told him my parents lived nearby. Not true. I would just walk there. I really didn't want him to know where I lived at this point. He follows me out into the street, offering me a ride, trying to hold my hand and walk me home, so I just bolt. I broke a flip-flop that day. I think he followed me for a while, but I got far enough ahead of him. It was about a 2-hour walk home, so I think eventually he just gave up. It started raining on the way. I remember being in my bathing suit and a dress, holding my shoes, running in the rain and laughing about how much I'd rather be there on the side of the road than in that guy's house for one more minute. We've been dating ever since. Just kidding. I broke up with him over text message when I got home. Apparently, it's not so easy to force someone to be your girlfriend. Who would have guessed? You know what? At this point, let's call it the Rufus list. And that guy just got on it. Story 5. He kept writing me texts saying crap like, "Baby, we were meant to be together. If you give me a chance, please, baby." Which is a schmuck code for, "I want to sleep with you. Why won't you let me?" So I acted like a crazy person and sent him the lyrics to Bob Dylan's Changing of the Guards and gave him an in-depth analysis on how these lyrics were assigned from some great cosmic being and made up BS about how I found connections in the lyrics to our new relationship. He totally screwed off after that and never sent me another message. It was fun though. I totally recommend everyone act crazy when dealing with crazy. Yeah, I second that motion. Just go on tangent about something they don't care about. And you are golden. Story 6. I finally had to sick my dad on someone. Ordinarily, I never would because the man has multiple black belts in martial arts. Competitively did martial arts and was crazy. I'd much rather go to the police than dad, but it didn't work. Started out as a friend of my boyfriend who was introduced to me. He wasn't really my friend, but was always around. He was never anything but polite, but would constantly reference how lucky my boyfriend was. Fast forward to our breakup. Suddenly, this guy was everywhere I went. Due to the breakup, we weren't even in the same circle. The grocery store, the park, everywhere. Small town, so I didn't really consider him stalkerish, especially as he was always so polite. He asked me out once. I said no, and he remained polite. Continued to follow me around. Made friends with all my friends, showed up anywhere he heard I'd be. He was older. I was 18, he was 24, so everyone always had him buy alcohol. No one complained about him, he was polite, really only spoke to me. It started to make me uncomfortable, but I didn't feel afraid. I was pretty sure I could kick his bum if it ever came to it. I'm my father's daughter. So one night, my two friends were complaining they'd bought 4 tickets to a concert and the other couple backed out. I said I'd go, and my stalker said he'd go. Oops. Oh well, I didn't want to be rude. Night of the concert, he never showed. It was a relief, honestly. We had fun, and I didn't really think about it much. A couple days later, I got a collect call from my county jail. It was this guy apologizing over and over for standing me up for a first date. He got arrested for possession. I assured him I wasn't upset and that it wasn't a date anyway. I got a couple more collect calls, but I just declined them. That's when the letters started. 2 or 3 a day. Some were begging for forgiveness. Some were explicit fantasies. Some were him writing like we were a couple, talking about our future kids and stuff. I took one more call to tell him to stop. They kept coming. And his dad, I was mad about him being in jail, keeping us apart. That's why I didn't write back or take his calls. I wrote to all my friends, telling them we were in love and asking them to get me to talk to him. When they told him to stop, he decided they were against him and trying to keep us apart. They were lying about him and confusing me. I called the jail and told them, so they restricted my number and didn't post letters to me from him. I was quiet for about a week. The letters in his handwriting started to appear in my car and mailbox, but not posted. The letters were telling me he got locked up in psych for trying to end it all and how I was an evil witch for doing this to him. Then the next would be begging for forgiveness. Then more fantasy stuff, but now it all featured him punishing me and teaching me how to be a good girl. I called the police. They caught someone putting the letters in my car. He'd hired some ex-con to deliver them. He'd mail to him, and that guy would deliver them. The guy had photos of me he was mailing back to my stalker. The guy didn't get charged, but they revoked his parole or something. It was quiet for another week. Then it all started again. Finally, I called my dad and told him the whole story and showed him a few of the letters. He turned a shade of purple and drove straight to the jail. I have no idea what he said or did, but I only got one more letter. That was a terrified apology begging me not to have him ended and he'd never contact me again. He never did. He never contacted any of my friends. What did your dad do? Story 7. I told the creeper I wasn't young. I was in college, looked like a high schooler, was 21 and a senior in college. Out at a bar or restaurant with some friends who were also college students, but not all 21 and able to drink legally. So we were there before the 8 p.m. 21 plus only cutoff. I was well known as a creeper magnet. You could drop me in a room with 100 guys, 99 perfectly reasonable human beings, and one creeper. And the creeper, and no one else, would instantly make a beeline for me. Creeper comes up, all, hey, baby, and there I am drinking my soda like, please go away now. He sits down, makes himself comfortable, starts grilling me about what classes I like, what my plans are after graduation, the like. I'm giving one-word answers, looking for my friends to come rescue me from Creeper. Creeper asks if I know where I want to go to college. It occurs to me that he thinks I'm a high school student. Bonus Creeper points, the guy is in his 30s. Very slyly offers to buy me a drink. Nudge, nudge, the special kind. I tell him if I want a drink, I'll buy my own, since I'm a senior in college. Little sonic boom as he vacated the stool. Yeah, I had a 30-something guy quit hitting on me because I wasn't young. If we all put our minds to it, catching kitty fiddlers is quite so easy, bro. Story 8. I walked into a grocery store one evening and had a feeling that someone was walking behind me. I turned around and saw a security guy following me. I didn't want him to keep staring at me, so I stopped to browse and made him go in front of me. He turned around and said, "You're really pretty." I was grossed out, so I pretended I didn't hear that and went to another aisle. And after a couple of minutes, surprise, surprise, he was behind me again. This time, I turned around, looked him in the eye, and said really loudly, "Can I help you? I feel like you're following me." He was caught off guard and mumbled something like, "Oh, no, I was just going this way." Then he left, and I didn't see him again. I talked to the store manager, who said that the man following me was not the store security, but was the plaza security. That just makes it even creepier. Story 9. Recently, I was at a 24-hour restaurant by myself around 9 or 10 p.m. It was the kind of place that had counters with bar stools and free Wi-Fi, with a mix of locals and travelers. At one point, I felt watched, and I looked up to see a man staring and smiling at me. I thought maybe I had met him somewhere, so I gave a quick, polite smile and resubmerged myself in Reddit and a cheap meal. An hour and a half later, my phone battery was out and I paid up and left. Well, he was there in the parking lot, waiting for me, smiling and waving from his truck and motioning for me to come over. I was shocked and froze mid-step for a couple seconds, but then nervously shook my head no and turned away to unlock my car door. I heard the truck engine start and saw the bright beams of headlights flash on behind me as I quickly hopped in my car, no fiddling with music playlists or air conditioning, and sped out of there. I thought I'd made it clear I wasn't interested, but when I saw a truck speeding along just beside me, I switched lanes just in case. Even then, thinking I must be paranoid, there were plenty of truckers on the road that night. Probably wasn't him. The truck also switched lanes, all the while getting closer. I frantically swerved back to the other lane. So did the truck. But this time he was right behind me, flashing his brights. After that only caused me to speed up, he swerved up next to my car and drove level with me while grinning and jovially waving for me to pull over. He chased me all over the road through town until I turned at full speed without signaling or braking and skidding sideways down a side road. Darted into a random driveway, turned off the car and hid crying and shaking for half an hour until I was sure he was gone. Some people really just need to be put down, man. Story 10. I got my boss to shout at him. I worked in a Chinese shop just after I left school, and this guy showed up every day for weeks, begging me to go out with him, telling me how pretty I am, etc. I got to the point where I was afraid to go to work because he'd started to hint that bad things could happen to girls who aren't nice, so I told my boss, using my 2 words of Chinese and a lot of sign language because Wang spoke 0 English. And when he came in, she started shouting at him in Chinese. I want you to picture the scene. 6-foot black man with muscles in his muscles being chased out of a tiny Chinese shop by an even tinier Chinese lady with a broom who's yelling at the top of her lungs. I'm pretty sure that the sea couldn't have washed him clean of what she said to him. It's a treasured memory to this day. Story 11. There was a guy in one of my freshman classes who would stare at me all during class. The desks were arranged in such a way that half were facing the front of the room and the other half were facing the opposite wall. This gave us a very clear view of one another. I had a gravity storm while I was walking down the stairs one day and somehow ended up with an impressive gash in the side of my leg. The guy saw the wound the next day and asked me what happened, and the day after that, he came up to my desk and said he had something to show me. He revealed a wound that was in the exact same spot as mine, as well as of a similar length. He told me he had done it for me. This was at the very beginning of the semester, and for the rest of the year, I was extremely vigilant about only looking straight ahead in that class so as to not make eye contact with him. I pretty much never saw the left side of my world events classroom. That is crazy. Story 12. When I was a junior in high school, a friend of mine introduced me to one of his friends. I talked to him every now and then. He said he was interested in me. I politely let him know I didn't reciprocate his feelings. Then the text started. For a few weeks, he would text me very explicit things constantly. This was before blocking was a thing. One night, my dad saw I was upset and asked me what was wrong. I told him. My dad is a psychiatrist. He can stay alarmingly calm in almost any situation, and he's used to dealing with crazy people, so my dad ended up calling this guy and calmly explained to him that he needed to tell his parents about pestering me because the police were going to be showing up at his house soon. The guy started crying, and I never heard from him again. Story 13. Block him on eBay. I'd already blocked him everywhere else, but he friggin' bid on my auction just so he could declare his love, insist I be his mistress, and promise that his Korean fiancé or baby mama really wouldn't mind, that that's normal in her culture. Oh, and also accused me of ripping him off while he was at it, as he didn't actually read the auction text and didn't know the computer I was selling was broken and was missing some parts. eBay. Now that's a stalking medium I haven't heard of before. Story 14. I faithfully prescribed to the act completely freaking insane method to get guys to leave me alone. Cackling maniacally, mumbling about disturbing stuff, humming erratically, and staring with the most disturbed look I can muster are good deterrents. I've also got a guy to stop hitting on me at a party by always redirecting any conversation he'd start up to the subject of crapping myself. I found it absolutely hilarious that there's a guy, somewhere in the world, who knows me as the girl who wouldn't stop talking about crapping herself. This is a fun hobby. Story 15. We lived a town away from each other in a very rural area, so I heard he was coming into my town from friends. I would call my friend who was old enough to drive and have her pick me up. Driving country roads was the only way he wouldn't bump into me. He would also stop by the house, and when my parents told him that I wasn't there, he would camp out in his car waiting for me to come home. I learned quickly that it usually took a couple of hours before he would give up and leave town. This happened a few times a week for a couple of months. Story 16. This was about 8 years ago. I was 17 and volunteered at a nursing home as a part of a high school course. I started talking to one of the older guys that worked there and pretty quickly had a change of heart. He became obsessive and called nonstop and would leave me upwards of 50 texts in a few hours. So I downloaded this recording that would play as my answering message. It had a trio ascending tones play and the familiar message that went something like, "We're sorry, the number you're trying to reach has been disconnected," etc. I just turned my phone off for a night so that he would hear this message and no ringing. It worked, to my surprise, and I never heard from him again after that. Story 17. I had a guy who wouldn't leave me alone at a San Diego trolley station. It was late at night and I was 17 and alone. I walked up to the biggest, scariest looking guy there and pretended like he was my friend. I even gave him a huge hug. Luckily, he immediately understood what was happening and played along with it. After about 2 minutes of me talking to the big dude, the creepy stalker guy left. I thanked the big dude profusely and he was super cool about it. He said I wasn't the first girl he's had to play along with in order to scare off a creeper. Story 18. I've never had a situation where a firm, "Please leave me alone or I'll take this to the police," didn't work. However, the number of times it's come to that is upsetting. When I was an 18-year-old lifeguard at a family pool, there was this 30-year-old dude who'd come to try to talk to me and a few other girls who worked there. He asked me how old I was, and when I said 18, he said, "Ooh, that's a fantastic age." He also then splashed me and said he'd only stop if I gave him my number. He stopped when I got my managers to kick him out. Story 19. I don't know if this fits, but when I was about 16, I was walking home with a male friend. About halfway up a hill, we noticed this strange car illegally parked. Honestly, just looked at each other and didn't give it a second thought. I had to part ways about 2 miles from my house. I lived in town, so that walk wasn't scary or uncomfortable. Plus, I really enjoyed it. Not even a minute after my friend left, that car came around the corner super quickly and proceeded to follow me for about a half a mile. At this point, I'm hyperventilating and have 911 dialed, but not called yet. The sun's going down and he's getting closer. He's out on the door and on something else I couldn't see. I just made a split decision then. I bolted into a bunch of backyards. I don't even know how many fences I jumped. I basically hid in the bushes for almost an hour until it was dark. At this point, I was still afraid to go home or call my mom in case he was still there. I didn't want him to see what our car and home looked like. I basically maneuvered my way through yards and small alleys. These are nice ones with shops in them, not something you'd see in NCIS. I got home, called my friend to make sure he was okay, then blabbed to my mom. She then convinced me to file a police report. I haven't heard anything back, and it's been 3 years. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 20. I moved halfway across the country to get away from an abusive, stalking ex. He still relentlessly stalks me online many years later. I have no social media accounts with photos, no Facebook, and frequently change UID on sites I post to. Also, to help out a female friend who couldn't get a guy to leave her alone at a concert, I pretended to be her psycho-lesbian girlfriend. She's tiny and femme, and I'm 5'8" and athletic. Mostly worked, though the schmuck did ask to see us make out. I told him to screw off. That was actually kind of fun, and we laugh about it now. Story 21. When I was in 5th grade, this kid tormented me, kissing me when I wasn't paying attention, chasing me, stealing my jackets and wearing them. I told parents, teachers, friends. Everyone thought it was funny. I had a teacher make us sit next to each other to work it out, I guess. When she left the room for a minute, with the whole class watching, he did the old yawn and put his arm around me. Right when he lifted his arm up, I punched him so hard in the freaking jewels he fell out of his chair and cried. Never touched me again. Yeah, that's a surefire way to get a boy to stop. Story 22. To be honest, dudes like this are kind of afraid of me. I don't act nice at all. If a guy does anything creepy towards me, I just flip out. I threw a rock at a dude's car whose cat called me once and sprinted toward a kid in high school, ready to deck him in the face. And they always, like clockwork, get scared. High school kid ran off, and the dude in the car just kind of whined and then drove off. Men like this aren't expecting you to fight back, just to politely nod and put up with it. So when you go all crazy, it scares the crap out of them. Story 23. Every time I have to get another man involved to help me. That doesn't seem that ridiculous, but it is. It should not take more than me saying no. The guy in line at a concert grabbed my and when I said, "Don't touch me," he blew up, threatening to get me kicked out of line. How he was just having a good time until I was a witch and didn't stop until his own friend said, "Dude, leave her alone." A couple weeks ago, I was at a bar and a man I had not interacted with at all came up behind me and pulled my ponytail. I said, "Don't freaking touch me." He tried to hit me. 3 other men had to drag him out of the bar. A couple weeks before that, I found a man none of us knew trying to get my incredibly blacked out friend into his car and actually argued with me that He knew her and would give her a ride until male friends shoved him away. Story 24. Well, after he, fellow classmate, followed me off the bus from my high school and chased me down the street, I collected a record of all his creepy or threatening messages to me, my mom, from the past 3 years and showed them to the school authorities. I sat in a room and had a very tense and scary meeting with him, the cops, the vice principal, and my parents all together. Lots of crying and shaking from both ends. Wasn't enough to expel him for the years of threats that he gave me, but it did leave me alone for a few months before getting expelled for some lame reason just as we were both supposed to graduate high school. Haven't seen or heard from him since. Story 25. The guy was horrible. I was out with a few friends at a club for one of their social get-togethers, and suddenly one of my friends' other friends' group had turned up, and I knew one of them had a crush of some sort on me. He kept touching me. I had bruises from it. I don't recall him being intoxicated, though. I kept telling him to stop firmly, and he kept going. I ended up having enough because he wasn't stopping, and I was in a position where I didn't feel safe with my friends anymore. I took my leave to the bathroom, called a friend and asked them to become a family member and to call back in 10 minutes with some sort of urgent story so I can legitimately leave the party with no problems against anyone. I changed my friend's name to Mom in my contacts and went back out. It was still overly clingy, and I pretty much snapped and told him to screw off. It got really intense because he pulled me. I just wanted to go. Then my mom called. Till I go, and I answered. She told me my grandmother passed away and they were going to come and pick me up at 5. I didn't tell him anything, bar keeping that story, and ended up making an exit out of the club. To this day, I have no idea why my true friend said that, but it was somewhat effective. I blocked him on all social media for good measure. Not friends with a lot of them anymore either. They weren't exactly supportive of my negative feedback to his advances. Story 26. Once, this boy cornered me at school and had his friends surround me so I couldn't run away. He kept grabbing me and calling me his doll, stuff like that. Anyway, I told my dad about it, and he showed up to the kid's house in full uniform. He was a state trooper and had a talk with the kid and his dad about it. The next day, the kid apologized to me repeatedly and told me he'd only done it because I'm so very beautiful. He promised to never ever talk to me again, and he kept his word. All those years we lived in the same tiny town, and he avoided me like the plague. Story 27. I live above a bar on a very busy street consisting mainly of clubs. Unfortunately, the door to my flat is literally on the street. If I want a cigarette, I have to stand on the sidewalk. Especially nights and weekends, it is a constant barrage of being accosted or asking for money. On an off note, intoxicated people will think my door is to the bar when I'm standing directly in front of it and try to barge past me. I've never had any real trouble, but when the going gets tough, I will openly admit to having mono and pretend to attempt to hiss on them. Any other suggestions would be lovely because I have a year lease and hate it. Story 28. After a live music show, some dude comes up to me and goes, "Hey baby, where are you from?" I'm Asian. It's a common pickup line. Barf. He aggressively offers me a substance, like puts it in my hand and pushes my hand to my face. I say no thanks because I can tell where that is going. I prance off to dance with my friends, but 10 minutes later the same guy catches me at the bar and grabs me with both arms and tells me we're doing shots. I'm not interested in getting messed up with this guy. He's showing ulterior motives. Heck, it's not even ulterior, it's completely obvious and upfront. In an attempt to avoid an argument because this guy is not taking no for an answer, I tell him I have to use the bathroom so I can get out of his hold, but he tells me, "No, you aren't," and tightens his hold on me. At which point I'm now afraid of this dude, so I lift my knees and drop my weight hard, slip down and out of his ridiculously tight grip and roll away. Thank you, self-defense classes. Run out of the venue and text my friends bye and don't look back. So messed up. Story 29. I ghosted him and had put his Facebook page on my Facebook page because he was inboxing people, asking them to tell them that I was still alive and to pass on that he still loved me. We had a thing when I was younger, but he lied too much for my liking. We tried again, but the lying was still there, but the attraction wasn't. I tried to say I just want to be friends, but he kept insisting that I'd feel different after I kissed him, that I would definitely want to sleep with him then. So I simply blocked him on everything and left. My friends and I were convinced he had simply given up, until he began trying to contact my housemate on Steam last weekend. So now I guess I'll wait and see what happens next. Story 30. I once sent a guy to Japan. I'm pretty sure he's a Redditor, so I won't give too many details, but I found a job he couldn't refuse and applied for it using his name and information. He was offered the job. Last I heard, he was back there. We dated for a couple of years and the breakup was amicable at first, but he began following me and leaving weird notes, talking to my friends about conversations we'd had. We hadn't. He was trying to manipulate them into giving more information. I later found out he'd read my journals, too. Unintended side effect. I think he really liked the job and definitely loved Japan. Now we're both happy. I hope and think. Story 31. One summer, I was working at a festival and planned to meet with some colleagues for a drink after my shift at the bar right outside the festival's limit. I finished a bit early, so I figured to go to the bar first and have a drink by myself while waiting for them. Well, the second I sat down, some guy sat down at my table and started hitting on me. After telling him several times that I wasn't interested, he still wouldn't leave me alone, so I walked out of the bar thinking he would get the message. He didn't. He followed me outside, and back inside when I tried to avoid him. I had to go out again and walk back into the festival crowd to try and lose him. It was an open festival downtown, so you didn't have to pay or wait in line to get in. He kept on following me, so I started to run in a circle in the crowd until I completely lost him and called my colleagues to tell them to meet me at the different bar. I didn't go to bars by myself anymore. Story 32. For the most part, I'm straight up honest and tell creepers and non-creepers alike that I'm just not interested. One time, though, I was having a girls' night out with friends. I was not single, but my friends were. We were talking to a couple guys, one of whom would not stop hitting on me. I tried to be a good wingman, deflect him onto a friend. He's not having any of it. I don't want to straight up tell him no because my friends are talking to his friends and it could ruin the mood or whatever by being a witch. So I just started talking about how much I enjoy playing Pokemon. Long before Go came out and he just walked away without another word. Success. Story 33. A few years ago, I was in my dentist's waiting room. There was only one other person there and kept looking at me. I was reading but could sort of see him over the top of my book. Finally, he started talking to me, saying hi, asking my name, that kind of thing. It just had kind of a creepy vibe. Ladies, you know what I mean. I gave terse one-word answers and put my book up in front of my face, but that didn't deter him. He asked if I had a boyfriend. I lied and said yes, figuring that would be the end of things. Oh no. He wanted to know boyfriend's name, how we met, what he did for a living. It was one of the weirdest interactions I've ever had in my entire life. I was so uncomfortable but couldn't make myself just say, I don't want to talk to you. I've never been so glad to see my dentist in my whole life. When he finally came out to get me, I jumped out of my seat and practically ran to the exam room. Story 34. I was at the beach once for a summer work party and had one of my coworkers approach me while I was swimming. He started out nicely enough, but he quickly was having trouble staying a reasonable distance away from me in the water, touching my swimsuit every time the tide pushed him towards me. I was trying to get back to shore as quickly as I could. Once we got in standing depth, he was full on grabbing me, trying to get me to kiss him. I finally runched away and made it back to where our group was. Everyone's reaction was, Ooh, Austin Q, we saw you and Guy in the water together. You don't have to hide your romance from us. As though what he did was adorable. I told I was an unwilling participant and they continued to tease me for the rest of the party. It even became a running joke at work about our secret flirtation. Story 35. Hiding with some nuns and then running a lot. I was at a Home Depot and was looking at some lighting, which was in the back corner of the store where no one else happened to be. All of a sudden, someone starts talking to me. Someone who's standing frighteningly near me, who I didn't hear get to that spot. He says, I want to go out for coffee with you. Give me your phone number. It was very strong, creepy van vibes. That's very specific, but completely my first thoughts of him. I said, I'm sorry, that's nice of you, but I'm seeing someone. I wasn't. He gets really mad, like he's having trouble controlling it. He tried asking if we could get coffee anyway, as friends. Still trying to get my phone number, and I was just like, I don't think so. I started walking towards more people. As I'm walking down aisles, I realize he's walking one aisle over. I switched aisles, and I'm no longer sure where he is, but I have a really bad feeling. I'm up towards the front of the store and sort of panicking. There are these 4 nuns waiting in line to check out. For some reason, I felt like he wouldn't come and get me if I were with the nuns, so I got in line with them. I've sort of calmed down. And then I get to the door to leave. It's a warehouse-type store, so there are like 7 doors open in the front. The guy standing in front of the door I'm about to exit. I took off running. It's a big parking lot with a bunch of stores. I run a few stores down into a Safeway, through the Safeway out a different Safeway door, cut across the parking lot into a Starbucks, which only has one entrance. Wait a few minutes, then run to a car that isn't mine as though the parking lot randomly eventually getting to my car and driving away. Story 36. I was a friend's double date every weekend. She paid me and I was pretty desperate for extra cash. I had no interest in the party life, so I usually sat at the same booth. Bouncer saved it for me, alone, and kept watching my friend's purse and all her friends' purses. Bouncers knew me well and knew few to no males were welcome to my booth. I'd just gone out of a really bad relationship, that's why I had zero interest in men. I didn't want anyone near or to touch me. I needed time to heal and get over crap. The bouncers knew this as they were all friends with my friend. One day, some guy sat at my booth. I looked at him and politely said I'm not interested. Most usually leave no issues. This guy, This guy refused and kept bothering me. I asked him politely to leave, but he remained. The bouncer came over and asked if he was welcomed. The guy said yes. I said no, he won't leave. The bouncer made him leave and said to never come near my booth again. It started getting packed and the bouncers were too busy working to notice this guy really pestering me. I grabbed my purses, only had one that night, and quickly headed to the patio where I knew I'd find two 7-foot male friends. I wedged myself in between them and told them I had a guy problem and to please help me. They put their arms around me to claim me as theirs. What the heck, the guy still tried to bother me. Both guys turned around and aggressively told the guy I belonged to them and to F off. The guy stared at me for the rest of the night, so I stayed with the guys as the guy was probably dangerous and I'm only 5'2", was shy. Story 37. I had my mom tell him I passed away. We worked a seasonal job together when I was 17. Everyone on the crew had a list of each other's phone numbers, and after the season was over, the calls started. We didn't work directly together, so I had no clue who he was. I just knew the face that matched the name. Asked me to grab dinner with him because he just needed someone to talk to, and I agreed. Get to the restaurant and he's there with his mom. He then launches into his whole life story, his battle with depression, the meds he takes, and his mom is completely silent like this is totally normal. Meanwhile, I'm freaking out because I'm definitely not in any position to be someone's emotional crutch and I'm trying my best to hide my discomfort. I pretend I forgot about a thing I had to get to, pay my tab, and make my exit. He calls the next day, and I ignore it. Same for the following day. Then my mother answers. My mom's not the type to lie by any means. Furthermore, she's exactly the type to ask questions. When she comes to announce that Creepy McCreeperton is on the phone for me, I panic. Before I can stop myself, the words, "Can you just tell him it passed away?" come out of my mouth. She looks at me quizzically for a minute, but I guess she saw how freaked out I was by this and relays the message. Now Creepy already has it in his head. I'm home, since Mom put him on hold, but she says something to the effect of I still think she's here. It was so recent and it's been hard on all of us. He accepts this and ends the call. And I'm just waiting for the interrogation. But it never happened. He stopped calling after that, and my mom was actually there for me for the first time in 17 years. No questions asked. Story 38. I was at a karaoke night with a few friends, and this guy kept bothering me for my number. I politely declined because I wasn't interested and didn't want to lie or lead him on. He kept badgering me, and after the final no, he called me a witch for not wanting to give him my number. I said, "You know what? I'm sorry. I really was being a little bit of a witch just then. I'll give you my number. Just don't call until you're alone, okay?" I showed him my number on my phone screen and he went on his way. I had the rejection hotline local area code number saved in my phone for laughs as my number, so I gave him that. When you call it, it gives you a long lecture about why you could possibly have been given this number. I bet he wasn't so happy when he was finally alone that night. Story 39. He discovered I was a girl in World of Warcraft. He immediately tried to join my guild, denied, and then asked me to marry him several times. He kept sending me random crap from his inventory because copper ore just screams "take me now." The awkward love poems only a basement-dwelling troglodyte can come up with. Again, we'd never spoken, but he wanted to marry me. So like a wise and intelligent person, I gave him my phone number. He texted me as Johnson. I responded with pictures of a dog or cat with arrows pointing right at the back. Those arrows were labeled with his name. This was the only communication I ever sent him. No words, just those. He gave up after about 3 days. Story 40. I've had to do lots of things. Pretend a guy friend is on a date. I've pretended to be on the phone and talking to someone to be able to ignore a guy hitting on me. Call the police. Literally. Pretend I'm still together with my ex. Gag. I even told all my guy friends in my neighborhood that a neighbor pestered me so they'd be a bit more menacing when they saw him around and he'd get the hint to leave me the heck alone. Online, just block and ignore, repeatedly. I've had guys make up new online profiles to talk to me after I've blocked them. I've had to report people to group admins who pestered me and have them kicked out of the groups I'm in. I don't know, I'm like a magnet for weirdos and guys who can't take no for an answer, I guess. Unfortunately, I still get pestered and hit on by guys all the time. A lot of guys don't take no for an answer easily. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're gonna love this. Catch you in that video.